The bright afternoon sun streamed through the giant glass windows of Eastbrook Mall, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Maya Chen walked confidently through the busy shopping center, her athletic frame moving with the natural grace of someone who had spent years in military training. At 32 years old, she carried herself with the discipline of her Marine background, though today she was simply enjoying a peaceful shopping trip. Maya's dark hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and she wore comfortable civilian clothes, blue jeans, a white t-shirt, and a light jacket. As she passed by the luxury stores, something caught her trained eye. Officer James Barrett, a mall security guard she had seen before, was following a young black teenager who was just window shopping. Maya slowed her pace, pretending to look at her phone while observing the situation. The teenager, probably no more than 15, was clearly uncomfortable as Barrett shadowed his every move. The boy finally entered a sports store, and Barrett stationed himself right outside, watching through the glass like a hawk. This isn't right, Maya thought to herself, her combat instructor instincts kicking in. She had seen Barrett doing this before, targeting black shoppers, especially the young ones. Today, something felt different. Barrett seemed more aggressive than usual, his hand resting too casually on his belt near his weapon. Maya opened her phone's camera and started recording discreetly. As a self-defense instructor who taught at the local community center, she had learned that documentation could be the best weapon in situations like these. Within just 30 minutes, she witnessed Barrett stop 3 different black shoppers, demanding to see their receipts while letting other customers walk by freely. The air in the mall felt heavy with tension. Other shoppers were beginning to notice too. An elderly couple shook their heads disapprovingly as they watched Barrett aggressively question a black woman about the shopping bags she was carrying. A group of teenagers pulled out their phones, whispering among themselves about the officer's behavior. Maya's heart rate increased as she watched Barrett's body language become increasingly hostile. His shoulders were tense, his movements sharp and aggressive. She had seen this body language before, both in combat situations and in her years of teaching self-defense. These were the signs of someone looking for confrontation, not trying to maintain peace. She moved closer to the central area of the mall, keeping Barrett in her line of sight. The mall was getting busier as the afternoon crowd started flowing in. Families with shopping bags, groups of friends laughing together, and tired parents with excited children filled the wide corridors. But amidst all this normal activity, Barrett's behavior stood out like a dark cloud on a sunny day. Then Maya spotted her. Tanya Williams. She didn't know the young woman's name yet, but she would never forget her face after what was about to happen. Tanya was walking out of a high-end boutique, dressed professionally in a pencil skirt and blouse, carrying 2 shopping bags. She had a kind face, warm brown eyes, and carried herself with quiet dignity. Maya noticed her student ID card hanging from a lanyard around her neck, a graduate student probably. Barrett noticed her too. Maya saw his entire demeanor change as he spotted Tanya leaving the store. He straightened up, his hand again moving to his belt, and began walking purposefully toward the young woman. Maya's military training had taught her to read situations, to spot trouble before it happened, and every instinct she had was screaming that this was about to go very wrong. Without drawing attention to herself, Maya positioned herself closer to where Barrett was heading. She kept her phone recording, made sure it was charged, and took a deep breath. Years of Marine training and combat experience had taught her that the most important moments often came down to split-second decisions. She hoped she was wrong about what she was seeing, but if she wasn't, she knew she couldn't stand by and watch injustice happen. The mall's cheerful background music and the chatter of happy shoppers continued around them, but Maya could feel it, the calm before the storm. She watched as Barrett approached Tanya, his steps determined and aggressive. The next few moments would change everything. Officer Barrett moved quickly through the crowded mall, his boots making sharp sounds against the tile floor as he approached Tanya Williams. The young graduate student was checking her phone, completely unaware of the trouble heading her way. Her shopping bags from the expensive boutiques swung gently at her side. "Stop right there." Barrett's voice boomed across the mall's corridor, making several nearby shoppers jump. Tanya looked up, surprised and confused. Her warm brown eyes widened as she saw the security officer rushing toward her. She froze in place, her hand tightening around her shopping bags. "Show me your receipt and ID right now," Barrett demanded, his face red with unnecessary anger. He positioned himself directly in front of Tanya, blocking her path. His hand rested on his belt, close to his weapon, a clear show of intimidation. Tanya remained calm, though her hands shook slightly as she reached into her purse. "Of course, officer," she said in a steady voice. She pulled out her store receipt and her driver's license, holding them out for Barrett to see. "I just bought these items. Everything is properly paid for." Maya watched from nearby, her phone still recording. She noticed how other shoppers had stopped to watch the scene unfold. Some had their phones out too, recording the unnecessary confrontation. A small crowd was beginning to gather, their faces showing a mix of concern and disapproval. Barrett snatched the receipt from Tanya's hand, studying it with exaggerated suspicion. "This could be fake," he said loudly, even though the receipt clearly showed the store's logo and today's date. "And how do I know that's really your ID?" "Sir," Tanya replied, her voice still steady but tired, as if she had dealt with this kind of treatment before. "I just came from that store right there. You can ask the salespeople who helped me. They'll remember me because I spent over an hour choosing these items." A young sales associate from the boutique had noticed the commotion and stepped out of the store. "Is everything okay?" she called out. "That lady was just in our store. I helped her myself." Barrett's face grew even redder. He ignored the sales associate and turned back to Tanya. "Empty your bags," he ordered, his voice getting louder. "Do it right here, right now." The crowd of onlookers had grown larger. An elderly woman whispered to her husband, "This isn't right." A group of teenagers stood nearby, their phones raised, capturing every moment of Barrett's inappropriate behavior. Tanya took a deep breath and stood up straighter. "Officer, I've shown you my receipt and ID. The store employee has confirmed I just made these purchases. I don't need to empty my bags in the middle of the mall. I'd like to leave now." She tried to step around Barrett, but he moved to block her path again. Maya saw his body language change. His shoulders tensed, his stance widened, and his right hand gripped his belt more firmly. These were the warning signs she had learned to recognize both in combat and as a self-defense instructor. "You're not going anywhere," Barrett growled, reaching for Tanya's shopping bags. "If you won't empty them, I will." Tanya pulled back, protecting her purchases. "Please don't touch my belongings," she said firmly. "I know my rights. You have no reason to search my bags." The situation was balancing on a knife's edge. Maya could see Barrett's anger building like a pressure cooker about to explode. His face was now dark with rage, and his breathing had become heavy and irregular. These were the signs of someone about to lose control. Other mall security guards had noticed the situation but stayed back, unsure how to handle their colleagues' inappropriate behavior. The crowd had grown even larger, with some people calling out in support of Tanya. Maya knew what was coming next. She had seen this pattern before. When people like Barrett felt their authority challenged, they'd often resorted to force. She moved closer, her marine training kicking in as she prepared for what might happen. The next few seconds would require perfect timing and control. The tension in the mall reached its breaking point as Officer Barrett suddenly grabbed Tanya's arm. His fingers dug into her skin, making her wince in pain. The shopping bags she was holding dropped to the ground, their contents spilling across the shiny floor. "Let go of me." Tanya's voice was firm but frightened. She tried to pull away, but Barrett's grip only tightened. The crowd gasped, and more phones came out to record the unfolding scene. Maya knew this was the moment to act. She stepped forward from the crowd, her movements calm but purposeful. Her phone was still recording in her left hand as she approached the situation. "Officer Barrett," Maya called out in a clear, strong voice. Years of Marine training had taught her how to command attention without escalating a situation. "I'm Maya Chen, former Marine Corps combat instructor. Please release her arm. You're hurting her." Barrett's head snapped around to face Maya, but he didn't loosen his grip on Tanya. "Stay back," he shouted. "This is none of your business." Maya took another careful step forward, keeping her free hand visible and open. "Sir, I've been recording your behavior for the past hour. You've been targeting black shoppers, and now you're using excessive force on an innocent woman. Let's talk about this calmly." The mention of being recorded made Barrett's face turn an even darker shade of red. Some of the other mall security guards finally began moving closer, realizing the situation was getting out of hand. "I said stay back." Barrett's voice cracked with anger. He pulled Tanya closer, using her as a shield between himself and Maya. Tanya's eyes were wide with fear, but she remained remarkably composed. Maya kept her voice steady as she spoke again. Everyone here is recording this, Officer Barrett. Look around you. There are dozens of witnesses. The store employee has confirmed Ms. Williams made her purchases legally. You have no reason to detain her. The crowd had grown even larger. People were whispering and pointing, some shouting at Barrett to let Tanya go. The mall's regular background music seemed oddly cheerful against the tense scene playing out. You don't understand. Barrett spat out, his grip still tight on Tanya's arm. I'm doing my job. These people come in here and... These people? Maya cut him off, her voice sharp but controlled. Officer, your job is to protect and serve everyone in this mall equally. Right now, you're doing neither. Tanya spoke up, her voice trembling but determined. Please, my arm really hurts. I haven't done anything wrong. Maya could see Barrett's internal struggle playing across his face. His training told him to maintain control, but his anger was pushing him toward violence. She recognized the signs. The tightening of his jaw, the slight shift in his stance, the way his free hand kept moving toward his weapon. I'm going to tell you one more time, Maya said, taking another step closer. Release her arm. Let's handle this professionally. I have combat medical training. I can already see the bruises forming where you're gripping her. That's assault, Officer Barrett, and it's all on video. The other security guards were finally close enough to intervene. One of them, an older officer with gray hair, called out, Barrett, let her go. That's an order. But Maya saw it happening before anyone else could react. Barrett's face twisted with rage as he realized he was losing control of the situation. His body tensed in that familiar way she had seen countless times in combat. He was preparing to attack. In that split second, Maya's mind raced through her options. She needed to protect Tanya without escalating the violence. She knew Barrett was about to do something desperate, something that would change everyone's lives in the next few moments. The mall's security cameras whirred above them, recording everything. The crowd held their breath, phones steady in their hands, as Officer Barrett made his final, fatal mistake. Everything happened in a flash. Officer Barrett suddenly shoved Tanya aside and aimed a vicious kick at her legs. The crowd screamed, but Maya was already moving. Years of combat training took over as she stepped forward with perfect timing. Maya's body flowed like water as she deflected Barrett's kick with a swift, defensive movement. Her left hand, still holding the phone and recording, remained steady. Her right hand caught Tanya's arm, steadying the young woman before she could fall. Stand down, officer. Maya's voice cut through the chaos, but Barrett was beyond listening. His face twisted with rage as he realized his kick had missed. He charged forward, reaching for his baton. Maya quickly guided Tanya behind her. Stay back, she told her calmly. Then, facing Barrett, she shifted into a defensive stance. Her feet were planted firmly on the mall's polished floor, her body relaxed but ready. You're interfering with security business. Barrett screamed, swinging his baton wildly. But Maya saw something in his eyes that her combat experience recognized immediately: fear. Behind his rage was the panic of a man who knew he had gone too far. The crowd had backed away, forming a wide circle around them. Dozens of phones captured every moment. The other security guards were shouting into their radios, calling for backup. Barrett swung the baton again, but Maya's training made his movements seem almost slow. She stepped inside his swing, her movements precise and controlled. In one smooth motion, she caught his wrist and applied just enough pressure to make his fingers open. The baton clattered to the floor. No, Barrett screamed, his voice cracking. He tried to punch with his free hand, but Maya was already moving. She redirected his energy, using his own momentum against him. Barrett stumbled forward, off balance and vulnerable. Maya could have ended it right there with a takedown, but she chose a different approach. She maintained control of his wrist, using a hold that any police officer would recognize as standard procedure. It was painful enough to stop him from fighting, but caused no real damage. Officer Barrett, she said clearly, making sure the cameras could pick up her words. I am not attacking you. I am preventing you from assaulting an innocent civilian. Please stop resisting. Barrett struggled, but Maya's grip was perfect. She had taught this exact hold to hundreds of students. The more he fought, The more it hurt, but it would leave no lasting damage. "Let me go," he shouted, his face red with exertion and shame. "You can't do this to me. I'm an officer." "An officer's job is to protect people," Maya replied calmly, "not to abuse them. Now please, stop moving before you hurt yourself." Finally, the mall's head of security arrived with 2 police officers. They had seen the video footage from the security room and understood the situation immediately. "Officer Barrett," one of the police officers said, "stand down and put your hands behind your back." Maya waited until the police officer was ready, then smoothly transferred Barrett's wrist to his control. The officer quickly cuffed Barrett, who had finally stopped struggling. His face showed a mix of rage, fear, and dawning realization of what he had done. The second police officer turned to Maya. "Ma'am, we'll need your phone as evidence. The footage you recorded will be important." Maya nodded, still keeping herself positioned between Barrett and Tanya. She could feel the young woman trembling behind her, but when she turned to check on her, Tanya's eyes were clear and determined. The crowd began to applaud. Someone shouted, "That was amazing." Another voice called out, "Thank you for protecting her." But Maya wasn't interested in the praise. She turned to Tanya, speaking softly. "Are you okay? We should have the medics check your arm where he grabbed you." The police were leading Barrett away. He looked back once, his face now a mask of defeat. The other mall security guards were collecting statements from witnesses, and the crowd was finally beginning to disperse. The immediate danger was over, but Maya knew this was just the beginning. What happened next would be just as important as what had just occurred. The mall's first aid station was quiet compared to the chaos earlier. Tanya sat on an examination bed while a medical attendant gently checked her arm. Maya stayed nearby, watching as the attendant applied ice to the dark bruises forming where Barrett had grabbed Tanya. "These bruises will take a few days to heal," the attendant said, wrapping Tanya's arm carefully. "But nothing appears to be seriously damaged. You're very lucky this didn't end worse." Tanya looked at Maya with grateful eyes. "It would have been much worse if you hadn't been there." "Thank you, really. I can't even imagine what might have happened." Outside the first aid station, the mall was buzzing with activity. Police officers were interviewing witnesses, and news vans had started arriving at the parking lot. The story was spreading quickly across social media, with videos of the incident already going viral. "Miss Chen." A detective in plainclothes appeared at the door. "I'm Detective Sarah Martinez. We need to take your official statement. And Ms. Williams, will need yours as well. But first, I want you both to know that Officer Barrett is in custody and has been placed on immediate administrative leave." Maya nodded, her military training showing in her straight posture. "Of course, Detective. I have the entire incident recorded, starting from when I first noticed his suspicious behavior an hour before the confrontation." Detective Martinez's eyes lit up with interest. "That's excellent. Multiple videos will help build a solid case. The mall's security cameras caught everything too, and we have dozens of witness statements already." A young police officer appeared with Tanya's shopping bags, which had been collected from the floor. "Ma'am, your purchases," he said respectfully, placing them beside her. "Everything's been documented for evidence, but these belong to you." Tanya reached for the bags with her good arm, but her hands were shaking slightly. Maya noticed and stepped forward to help her. "The media is asking for interviews," Detective Martinez continued. "You're not obligated to speak with them, but if you choose to, we recommend waiting until you've given your official statements." Just then, Tanya's phone buzzed. She looked at it and her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she whispered. "The video is everywhere. My professor just sent me a message asking if I'm okay. It's on all the major news websites." Maya pulled out her own phone to find it flooded with notifications. Her self-defense students had recognized her in the videos and were sharing them widely. The incident was quickly becoming a symbol of standing up against abuse of power. "Ms. Chen," Detective Martinez said, "your response to the situation was textbook perfect. The police department would actually be interested in having you conduct some training sessions for our officers, if you'd be willing." Before Maya could respond, the mall's general manager arrived at the first aid station. He was a tall man in an expensive suit, looking both concerned and professionally composed. "Ms. Williams, Ms. Chen," he said, "I want to personally apologize for what happened today. This is not what our mall stands for. We're reviewing all our security protocols and will be making major changes. And of course, all your purchases today are on the house. Tanya shook her head. I don't want free things. I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. The manager nodded seriously. We're already scheduling mandatory bias training for all security personnel, but we value your input on other changes we should make. Maya watched as more people gathered outside the first aid station, reporters, police officers, curious shoppers. She could see phones pointed their way, more videos being taken, more stories being shared. The medical attendant finished wrapping Tanya's arm and stepped back. All done, but you should follow up with your doctor in the next few days. Detective Martinez checked her notebook. Whenever you're both ready, we can take your statements. Then you can decide if you want to speak to the media. This story isn't going away anytime soon. The next morning, Maya woke up to find her phone had crashed from too many notifications. The video of her confrontation with Officer Barrett had spread across every social media platform. News channels were playing it on repeat, and her inbox was flooded with interview requests. She sat on her couch, sipping coffee and watching herself on the morning news. The headlines read, Former Marine stops mall officer's racist attack and combat instructor's skillful intervention goes viral. Her phone rang. It was Tanya. Maya, have you seen the news? There's going to be a peaceful protest at the mall today. People want to speak out against racial profiling. They're asking if we'll come. Maya thought about it carefully. She hadn't planned to become the face of a movement, but sometimes life had other plans. What do you think, Tanya? Are you up for it? I think we need to be there, Tanya replied. Her voice was stronger today, more determined. My arm still hurts, but that's exactly why we need to speak up. This happens to people every day, but most of them have someone like you around to help. When they arrived at the mall 2 hours later, hundreds of people had gathered outside. Many carried signs reading, Stop Racial Profiling and Reform Mall Security Now. The crowd cheered when they recognized Maya and Tanya. Local community leaders had organized the protest properly, working with police to ensure everything stayed peaceful. The new mall security team stood respectfully at a distance, their badges showing they were from a different company than Barrett's. A community organizer named James Thompson approached them with a microphone. Would either of you like to say a few words to the crowd? He asked. Your story has inspired so many people to speak up. Tanya stepped forward first, her bandaged arm visible beneath her sleeve. The crowd fell quiet as she began to speak. What happened to me yesterday happens to people of color every day, she said, her voice clear and strong. The only difference is that this time, someone with the right training was there to help. We shouldn't need a Marine to protect us from the people who are supposed to protect us. The crowd applauded, and some people wiped tears from their eyes. Maya noticed news cameras filming everything, but for once, she didn't mind the attention. When it was her turn to speak, Maya kept her message simple. I used my combat training yesterday to stop violence, not to cause it, she said into the microphone. Every security officer and police officer should be trained to do the same. Force should be the last option, not the first. As she spoke, an official car pulled up to the mall. The city's police chief stepped out, along with several city council members. They had come to announce immediate changes to security training requirements. The police chief approached Maya and Tanya. We've reviewed all the footage, she said. Officer Barrett has been officially terminated, and we're implementing new training programs for all security personnel in the city. We'd like both of you to be part of developing these programs. News reporters crowded around, catching every word. Cameras flashed as Maya and Tanya shook hands with the police chief. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. It was becoming a movement for real change. A young black girl, maybe 12 years old, pushed through the crowd to reach them. She looked up at Maya with bright eyes. I want to learn to be strong like you, she said. Not just to fight, but to help people. Maya knelt down to the girl's level. Being strong isn't just about knowing how to fight, she said. It's about knowing when to fight, and more importantly, how to prevent fights from happening. Would you like to join my self-defense class? The girl nodded eagerly, and her mother stepped forward with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said, for showing our children that one person can make a difference. As the protests continued peacefully around them, Maya and Tanya shared a knowing look. This was just the beginning of something much bigger than themselves. 1 week after the incident, Maya stood in front of a packed community center. The room was filled with security officers, police trainees, and community members. On a large screen behind her, the video of her confrontation with Barrett played silently. "Today, we're going to learn about de-escalation," Maya said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "The best way to handle conflict is to prevent it from becoming violent in the first place." Tanya sat in the front row, her arm now healing well. She had become a regular speaker at these training sessions, sharing her experience from the victim's perspective. The bruises on her arm were fading, but her determination to create change had only grown stronger. In the back of the room, news cameras rolled quietly. The story had caught national attention, and a major TV network was filming a documentary about the changes happening in their city. Maya's phone still buzzed constantly with messages from other cities wanting to implement similar training programs. "The first thing Officer Barrett did wrong was profiling," Maya explained, pointing to the screen. "But his second mistake was letting his emotions control his actions. Let me show you how to stay calm under pressure." She invited 2 training volunteers to the front. One played an angry officer, the other a shopper. Maya demonstrated different techniques for calming tense situations, showing how simple changes in body language and tone of voice could prevent violence. The police chief, sitting in the second row, nodded approvingly. Since the incident, she had made Maya's training program mandatory for all security personnel in the city. Early results showed complaints against officers had dropped significantly. Ms. Chen, a young security officer, raised his hand. "What if someone is actually doing something wrong? How do we stay professional while still doing our job?" Maya smiled. This was always the most important question. "Good question. Let me show you how to be firm and effective without being aggressive. Tanya, would you help me demonstrate?" Tanya joined her at the front. Together, they showed the proper way to approach someone, ask for information, and handle resistance without escalating the situation. The officers in the room took careful notes. During the break, Maya checked her phone. Barrett's court hearing was scheduled for next week. The evidence against him was overwhelming, not just from the mall incident, but from dozens of previous complaints that had surfaced afterward. A message from the mall's general manager showed the positive changes already happening. Security complaints were down by 80%, and they had hired a diverse team of new officers who had all gone through Maya's training program. "Maya," Tanya called from across the room, "show them the holds you used. Everyone wants to learn how you disarmed Barrett without hurting him." The afternoon session focused on physical techniques, but Maya emphasized these were last resorts. "Your best weapons are your words and your calm presence," she repeated. Physical force should only be used to protect, never to punish. As the training session ended, a group of young security officers gathered around Maya. They shared their own experiences and challenges, asking for advice on handling difficult situations. Maya noticed they spoke with new awareness about treating all people with respect. The TV crew interviewed Tanya as she packed up her things. "This training isn't just about security," she told them. "It's about changing how we see and treat each other." Maya showed us that one person can make a difference, but real change happens when we all work together. Outside, the sun was setting over the city. Maya and Tanya walked to their cars, discussing plans for tomorrow's session. More cities had requested their program, and they were working on an online training version to reach more people. "You know," Tanya said, looking at the sunset, "something good really did come from that terrible day. We're helping change things, one person at a time." Maya nodded, thinking about all the lives that would be different because of these changes. The incident at the mall had lasted only minutes, but its impact would be felt for years to come. 6 months had passed since the incident at Eastbrook Mall. Maya stood at the entrance, looking at her reflection in the gleaming glass doors. The mall had changed. New security cameras, diverse security teams, and signs everywhere stating, "Everyone welcome here," in multiple languages. Inside, she passed the spot where the confrontation had happened. A small plaque on the wall read, "Site of Change, where our community chose to stand together." It was simple but meaningful, just like the changes that had spread across the city. Maya checked her watch. She was early for her meeting with Tanya, who was now finishing her graduate thesis on community policing reforms. They'd often met here for coffee, turning a place of bad memories into one of progress and friendship. Maya, Tanya's voice called out. She walked confidently through the mall, no longer looking over her shoulder. The past 6 months had transformed her from a victim into a powerful advocate for change. Did you see the morning news? They sat down at their usual cafe table. On the TV screen above them, a news report showed Barrett's final court appearance from yesterday. He had been found guilty of assault and civil rights violations. More importantly, his case had led to new laws about security officer training and accountability. The governor is signing the new Security Training Act today, Tanya said excitedly, showing Maya her phone. They're calling it the Chen Williams Law. Can you believe it? Maya smiled, remembering how far they'd come. Their training program had spread to 50 other cities. Security companies across the country were adopting their methods, and reports of racial profiling have dropped significantly wherever the program was implemented. A young security officer approached their table. Maya recognized her from their first training class. Ms. Chen, Ms. Williams, she said proudly, I wanted to tell you about something that happened yesterday. The officer, Sarah, described how she had diffused a tense situation using the techniques they had taught her. I kept hearing your voice in my head, she told Maya. Stay calm, use words first, show respect. It worked perfectly. As Sarah walked away, Tanya checked her calendar. The community center is packed for next week's training session. We have to start a waiting list. And 3 more cities want to start the program. Maya's phone buzzed, a message from the police academy. They had officially added her de-escalation techniques to their standard training curriculum. Another message showed that complaints against security officers at Eastbrook Mall had dropped to nearly 0. Oh, Tanya remembered something. That little girl from the protest. She's now leading anti-bullying programs at her school. She says you inspired her to find peaceful ways to help people. They watched as the diverse crowd of shoppers moved through the mall. Security officers smiled and greeted people instead of following them. Stores had removed their "We reserve the right to refuse service" signs, replacing them with "All are welcome" messages. Maya thought about Barrett, now facing years in prison. She didn't feel happy about his punishment, but she was glad the system had worked. His actions had unintentionally sparked changes that were making the world better. Sometimes, Maya said, watching a security officer help a lost child find his mother, the worst moments can lead to the best changes. Tanya nodded, touching the spot on her arm where the bruises had long since faded. We turned pain into progress. That's something to be proud of. A group of trainee officers waved as they passed by. They were part of the mall's new security team, carefully selected and thoroughly trained in Maya and Tanya's methods. Each one represented a small victory in their ongoing mission. As the afternoon sun streamed through the mall's skylights, Maya and Tanya planned their next steps. There was still work to be done, more people to train, more changes to make. But they had proven that change was possible. Ready for another 6 months? Tanya asked, standing up. Maya smiled, remembering that day 6 months ago when she had decided to step forward and make a difference. Ready for as long as it takes, she replied. We're just getting started.